A very warm good evening to everyone present today. I'm Divya Bansal, currently the Dean of Alumni, International Relations, and also Professor at PEC. Thank you for joining us today on our 10th session in the PEC Centenary Lecture Series as we celebrate the Army Day today. Army Day is celebrated in recognition of Field Marshal Cariappa, OB, taking over as the first Commander-in-Chief of the Indian Army from General Sir Francis Batra, the last British Commander-in-Chief in India on 15th January 1949. Army Day marks a day to salute the valiant soldiers who sacrificed their lives to protect the country and its citizens. It is an absolute honor and a proud privilege to welcome General Deependra Singh Hooda, who led the surgical strikes on Pakistan as the Northern Army Commander of India in the year 2006. I would also like to acknowledge the presence of our very own Dr. Dheeraj Sanghi, Director PEC. Our host for today's lecture is our own alum Shilpa Mahana Bhatnagar, who graduated from PEC in the year 1998 in computer science. She's a leader and mentor with over 22 years of experience in software products and is the CEO and co-founder of Evo XYZ Technologies. I would now request Shilpa to formally welcome and introduce General D.S. Hooda to all our viewers. Without further ado, I would now request you to take over, Shilpa. Thank you.
Thank you, Divya, for handing me over this presentation. Best wishes to all of you on the Indian Army Day. I'm extremely delighted, excited, and extremely nervous because this is my first time talking to a person who's so distinguished as General D.S. Hooda. I will now introduce him. Today we have with us General Deependra Singh Hooda, PVSM, UYSM, AVSM, VSM and BAR, ADC, as a distinguished speaker in our Centenary Lecture Series. An Indian Army veteran, General D.S. Hooda served the nation wholeheartedly for 40 long years and also commanded the Northern Army in one of the most successful operations carried out by the nation in recent years, the surgical strike on Pakistan in September of 2016. He started his 4-decade-long military career on the 15th of December 1976 and spent early parts of his career in the 4th Battalion of the 4th Gurkha Rifles. He spent a lot of his career as a part of counter-insurgency efforts in the northern and northeastern parts of the country. In Jammu and Kashmir, he commanded the infantry brigade and led a division in the state of Manipur. He also served in the United Nations mission in Ethiopia, Eritrea, for which he was awarded the UNMWE medal. And on the 1st of June 2014, he was given over the command of Northern Army, which he commanded till his retirement in December 2016. During this period, he was responsible for handling the troubled borders of Pakistan and China, as well as lead counter-insurgency operations in Jammu and Kashmir. To top it all off, he commanded the Indian forces during the surgical strikes on Pakistan in September of 2016, which has become a token of example of India's military prowess in recent years. In recognition of his dedication and exemplary hard work, he has been awarded several medals of honor, including the Param Vishisht Seva Medal, the Uttam Yudh Seva Medal, the Ati Vishisht Seva Medal, and he has got the Vishisht Seva Medal twice by the President of India. But most importantly, what touched my heart when I listened to his interview with Arnab Goswami was the fact that he said that the surgical strike operation success was something that left him with a high when he retired. Such is the person we are going to listen and talk today. We look forward to a mesmerizing and inspiring session as we welcome you to the Leadership in Times of Crisis, Lessons from the Army by General D.S. Hooda. General Hooda, over to you.
So thank you very much, Shilpa, for a very gracious introduction. Director PEC, Dr. Divya Bansal, gives me great pleasure to be here, and I'm privileged, to be able to deliver a lecture on the PEC Centenary Lecture Series. So it's a great honor for me. So thank you all very much for inviting me. I'm going to talk to you today about leadership in crisis, and I have a small presentation which I will share with you. And take it from there. So, in times of crisis, everybody sort of looks up at the leader, and leadership sort of acquires a mystical character, sometimes even a mythical character. That here is our boss, and he is going to do everything. We look upon him to provide a direction. We look upon him to provide a path for us. Often, everything good that happens, and often everything bad that happens in an organization is also attributed to a leader. And therefore, particularly in crisis, leadership becomes very important. In my own personal experience, uh, good leaders are those not only who suddenly emerge in a crisis, but are those leaders who've actually prepared the organizations to be able to handle a crisis. These are leaders who not just at the time of when crises occur, but who have consistently over a period of time built their organizations and prepared these organizations to be able to handle disruptive change. So that is the first part that I'm going to be talking about, which is how should leaders prepare for disruptive change. And obviously, with decades and decades of service in the army, what I'm going to talk to you today is from some personal examples, some lessons that we learn from the army life. For us in the army, a sort of routine disruption is when units and soldiers move from what we call peace stations to field areas. So imagine there is a unit of say about 1,000 men, which is today located at Chandigarh, enjoying all the facilities that this beautiful city can offer to us. Facilities in terms of market, shopping, schooling, internet facilities, uh, staying with your own families. And then these units, as a routine every 2 to 3 years, are ordered to move to field areas like Siachen. And this sudden change of lifestyle can be highly disruptive. So let me just show you some photographs. I know a lot of people talk about Siachen. What is Siachen all about? What are the conditions under which soldiers stay, and why do I call it very disruptive? So you look at this photograph of Siachen and you'll say, "Wow, what a beautiful place," and it is. But it's beautiful and it's deadly. Uh, this is a post called the Bana post, which was captured from the Pakistanis. It's the highest military deployment in the world. It's located at 21,120 feet. These are heights at which mountaineering is done, peaks are climbed, and people come back. This is a post that is manned 365 days in a year. Soldiers have to stay here. Temperatures drop to minus 60 degrees. You get up to 60 feet of snowfall in one winter season. The oxygen that you breathe is less than half of what we are breathing here today. Sitting in Chandigarh, uh, and it's not only the heights; it's the kind of terrain that is there, deep crevices. Movement from one place to another becomes extremely difficult. What you are seeing here is a makeshift bridge to cross a crevice, and this makeshift bridge is made with what? It's made with aluminum ladders which are strapped together. And the reason is because at heights like this, you can't carry construction stores, build bridges. Uh, Most people stay in tents. And again, the reason is, as I said, at these heights and altitudes, there are no roads. Everything that you carry has to be actually carried on your back. And therefore, uh, most people are living in tents like this. And the snowfall comes and the tents get covered, and then you have to dig them out. But even tents become a luxury. There are areas where you actually have to create your own habitat by digging into the snow and create snow shelters. So here you see some soldiers who are digging in, uh, and they dig in like this, and this is how they stay. And it's not as if you are just staying and attempting to survive, but You also have to man the borders. You have to make sure that there is no intrusion. Patrolling carries on irrespective of weather conditions. And soldiers, as I said, who, for example, gone from Chandigarh, are now pitched into this situation and are going to stay there for periods of 6 months to 1 year. These are areas where there is no internet communication, there are no mobile towers, there is nothing to do. It's just a group of 10, 15 people living with each other. So what is it? What is it that enables these soldiers to survive this massive disruption that takes place, in their lifestyles? So we do think of COVID as sort of disrupting our lifestyles in a major way. But just spare a thought for these soldiers who've gone from areas like where we are to areas like what I've showed you. And while I'm only showing you photographs of Siachen, there are other areas along our borders and the eastern sector, Kargil sector, which are equally difficult. So how do leaders prepare, their organizations for disruptive change? And I'll talk about 4 things. And the first of these is the creation of the right culture and ethic in an organization. I think this is the primary thing that keeps people going. So in the army, we talk about values like integrity, courage, loyalty, honor. And we often say, while these are nice, good to hear qualities, comradeship. But in the army, these are indispensable for our functioning. It is this culture that is created within the organization that actually sustains these soldiers in the most difficult of times. It's the ethic that bonds people together, makes them feel that what they're doing is extremely important. Now, I know there are different organizations, there are different cultures. What kind of ethic you want to create, what kind of values you want to create in an organization is dependent on the character of your own organization. But certainly, if there is a strong set of values in an organization, it helps these organizations get through difficult times. So the first thing I often see, go to some corporate houses, and there's a nice placard with, these are our company values, these are our organization values placed. I think you have to live those values and you have to inculcate those values in members of your organization. That is what is going to, the first thing that is going to help you get through difficult times. The second thing is a clear focus on what we say in the army is, say, mission. In your organizations, you could say a clear focus on purpose. What is the purpose of your organization? What is it looking to achieve? And I think if that clarity is there amongst all its members, that is something that will sustain you in difficult times. That purpose, that mission, that we are doing something which is larger than ourselves. We are defending the borders of India, and therefore we are willing to accept a certain amount of discomfort in order to fulfill that mission, which is larger than yourself. So I think, again, in an organization, if you can create that sense of purpose, you will also find that members of that organization are willing to go that extra mile if they are convinced that the purpose is correct and the purpose is right. So that's the second thing that good leaders do, is build a sense of purpose, within organizations. The third thing good leaders do is to build cohesive teams. And I think more than anything else, this is what is going to sustain, the organization through times where you feel sort of despair and you feel that things are extremely bad. And that's when you sort of rely on each other, on members of the team, to give you strength, to give you that succor, to listen to your problems. So cohesive, collaborative teams, I think, is very key. And for us in the army, frankly, there is no option but for this. And to do this, trust is the key. A number of organizations feel that a competitive culture is better, because a competitive culture where people are competing with each other might bring out the best in you. But I think what happens in a very competitive culture is that it sometimes generates suspicion and trust suffers. So for us in the organization, in the army at least, the fact that you need to have complete trust on each other is something that will sustain you through extremely difficult times. And let me just give you a small story here. So it was in 2015 that a patrol of special forces soldiers were carrying out a counter-terrorist operations in North Kashmir, and they were looking for a group of terrorists. Unfortunately, somehow the terrorists got to know that this group is coming and they're looking for us, and they laid an ambush for this team. So when the special forces team entered that ambush, the terrorists started firing, extremely heavy firing, and the first two members of the team, got hit by bullets and they fell to the ground. And the terrorists continued to, fire at these two people. Behind these two, the next two people, there was one Lance Naik Goswami, and there was this JCO Subedar Mahinder Singh. There were two people just behind them. Without blinking an eyelid, both of them rushed into this hail of fire to try and rescue these injured comrades. So they went there, they pulled them out. Unfortunately, while the two injured men got saved, subsequently, Lance Naik Goswami, got hit by bullets and he lost his life. Subedar Mahinder Singh again got hit by bullets and, currently paralyzed waist downwards. These are the two gentlemen. Goswami's wife receiving the Ashok Chakra from the president. That's the highest gallantry honor. And on the right is Subedar Mahinder receiving the Kirti Chakra. The question often asked is, why do men put their own lives in danger? It is not as if somebody gave them an order that, no, you go and rescue these people. No, they did it on their own. And I come back to what I said. It's because of the deep trust between soldiers, that if I'm in danger, somebody will come and rescue me. And the person who is looking at the injured person saying, I have no option, but if he is in danger, if he has a problem, I have to go to his aid. Now, I'm not saying we should have such an extreme sort of climate in civil organizations. The point I'm making is, if you build cohesive teams, if you encourage trust, in times of danger, in times of crisis, you will find that the atmosphere that is created, the bonding that is created is so good that it helps you get through these very, very difficult times. So as a leader, it's your responsibility to create these kind of teams and trust. And finally, if you want to be able to handle, change that is disruptive, you have to, as a leader, anticipate and prepare for it. We often find that we get so tied up in our day-to-day activity, in our day-to-day dealings, that thinking about the future, thinking about events that can cause you disruption, even in your fields, for example, there are areas and technologies that have actually had a disruptive effect on businesses. People who've handled it well, people who've anticipated, people who prepared for it are the ones who will emerge successful, from these crises. And again, here, let me give you a small example. This is Uri, 18 September 2016. This is the garrison that was attacked by terrorists. We lost 18, 19 men that day. It was a horrible, horrible feeling. losing so many men in a single incident. And then almost immediately the government, said that you have to send a strong message to Pakistan. We need to go across the border just as they have come across our border and hit us. We need to go back across the border and hit them. And we were also conscious that we needed to do it sooner rather than later. We couldn't have waited, waited and said, oh, now I have to prepare, now I have to train, now I need the information and intelligence about terrorist camps across. It's going to take me 6 months. The whole impact of what we did would have got lost. Fortunately, we had sort of anticipated and prepared for such a contingency. We had been training for almost 1 year. Just in case a major sort of operational task like this gets, given to us, how will we carry it out? So we've been carrying out intelligence, we've been gathering information, we had been training, we had been preparing. There was one group of soldiers, whom we prepared. We focused. This is a small group. I hope you can see the photograph properly. So these are 2 men, 3 men. We call them surveillance teams. They're experts at staying and remaining hidden. They could be 20 meters, 10 meters away from you, and you wouldn't even guess that they are there. So these are the people who go across into enemy territory. They can remain there for up to 72 hours, 3 days, 4 days at a time, gathering information and intelligence. And because we had trained them and prepared these people, as soon as we were tasked that we have to carry out the surgical strike, we sent them into Pakistani territory. Sorry. These are some of the photographs of the terrorist camps that they brought back for us. So they remained hidden, got these, and it was because of the information, the detailed information that these people provided to us about the camps, right down to how many men there are, how many sentries there are, what's the layout of the post, what time the sentries change over, what is the best way to go and attack these camps. It was because of this that we were finally able to launch a successful surgical strike. So I come back to the point I'm making. Unless you are able to anticipate, unless you prepared for these, call it a black swan event, call it a disruptive event. As a leader, if you prepared for it, you will be in a much, much better position rather than just getting completely surprised by something that happens. And then you say, oh, I wish I had thought about it a little more. And so as a leader, while sure, you are concerned about day-to-day actions, day-to-day events that are happening, I think it is also important that you set aside some members of your team, 1, 2, 3, depending on what you want, that you set these people aside, people who are going to think about future, how the future could unfold, and what contingencies that you could be faced with. I think it's very important that in organizations you have a small team of this kind. Let me now come to leadership during crisis. So I've talked about how we need to prepare, and I will now talk about leadership in crisis. And again, I'm going to talk to you, with a personal example. Uri got very famous, in 2016 because of the attack on the garrison and the surgical strikes that went on later. But 11 years before this, I myself had commanded the brigade at Uri. So I was the commander of the Uri garrison and the Uri brigade in 2005. When on 8 September 2005, we were hit by a massive earthquake. And in a space of about 30 seconds, the whole garrison had turned to rubble. I just show you some photographs. We had something like 160 buildings, and I'm talking about residential buildings, hospital buildings, stores, everything. Out of the 160, if I remember correctly, 155 buildings crashed completely. We lost all our equipment, we lost our stores, we lost, we lost all our logistic facilities. The hospital was completely crashed. And within minutes, just outside the military garrison is the Uri town. And the Uri town completely sort of just went up in flames. Gas cylinders blew up, and the town has started burning. Civilians, injured civilians, within 30 minutes were pouring into the garrison, wanting help, wanting assistance. Our own people were buried under buildings, not only at Uri garrison, but even posts which are along the line of control were completely damaged. So few people who were inside their bunkers doing sentry duty also were completely trapped. Roads were completely shut. So all the landslides that took place, Uri was the bridges collapsed, roads got buried, and it was like it's like a shock, that everything that you thought was normal is suddenly doesn't exist, and you have a major crisis on your hands. Telecommunications, all the communication towers were down. I was the senior most officer on the spot, and then everybody is looking at you for instructions. Everybody is looking at you for orders, and you also sort of feel, at that stage, sort of very isolated and very alone. So how is it that we handled, this very sudden shattering crisis that happened? And again, I will just make 3-4 large points about it. The first thing is a quick and firm decision making. In times of crisis, your whole team, all your members are looking up at the leader and wanting decisions from you. It is not as if people are not working. So they would be working, they would be doing their sort of routine duties, but everybody is looking for a direction where you can get out of a crisis. Sometimes the temptation among the leaders also is, let's not take a decision at this stage. We don't know whether the decision will be right or wrong. But what happens then is that then everybody starts, working with a thought process that this is what I think is right. And so you don't have a specific, path, a specific direction to work in. So I think it's essential for a leader to take quick decisions and to take firm decisions. All decisions may not be right, because they have this huge problem. What are the priorities? Should you use your dozers for clearing the roads? Should you use the dozers to clear the rubble and rescue people? So one is an individual sort of requirement that you need to pull out people. The other is a larger community requirement that if you open the roads, only then will relief material come in and affect the larger community. So there are sort of moral dilemmas in decision making, but the fact is that you need to take a firm decision. You need to take a quick decision. Not taking a decision, delaying a decision, is probably the worst thing that you can do in times of a crisis. I think the second thing for a leader when he's faced with a crisis is to retain his long-term focus. The temptation often is, let's get involved in everything. I'm the leader. I will get involved in everything. I will get my hands dirty. I will make sure each and every aspect is being supervised by me. As a result, what happens is that while you are able to deal with the day-to-day situations, we're able to deal with emerging problems, you suddenly find that time has passed by, things have got better, but the areas that you should have been focusing on to ensure that there is a long-term recovery for your organization, those areas get ignored. So we call it, the dilemma of, detachment versus involvement. How much should you involve yourself? How much should you detach yourself? And I think this is, again, a decision that has to be taken by leaders. And it will be good if, yes, look at what is happening, but at some level detach yourself from, getting too involved in day-to-day events, and make sure that your long-term recovery, your long-term focus remains intact. So as I said, these are difficult sort of decisions to take, but it's important if you want a long-term recovery for your organization in a crisis, is to look ahead and see how you, so which could also mean diverting some resources from dealing with the current crisis, diverting some resources which are going to look at long-term recovery aspects. So that's the second thing I think that the leaders need to do. It's also important at this stage for leaders to understand that leadership is not a vertical process, that here I am, such a great leader, and therefore everything that I say, has got to come from top to bottom. I will give all the directions, I will set everything, I will, micromanage and go into sort of all the details. Please understand at this stage, you can get swamped with, the kind of effort that you want to do. And therefore, look at leadership as a horizontal process where you are discussing, debating with your team members, then arriving at decision. There is a level of delegation in which you are able to delegate tasks. And again, I come back to that issue of trust. Have trust and faith in your team. And if you prepared them well, if you made sure that they're functioning well in normal times, they will also function as well during crisis. So don't look at leadership as a vertical process, that I'm the boss, that I have to do everything. The other thing that happens if the leader wants to sort of drive everything is, a culture gets created where people sort of then don't want to approach the boss and say, yes, whatever he's saying is right. So this, sort of leadership worship, becomes in some cases counterproductive. That what the leader is saying is always right. Let's not criticize him at all. Let us not discuss and debate with him. And therefore, I think also it feeds into the ego of the leader that whatever I'm saying is right, and he also becomes less and less consultative in the decision-making process. So it's important to understand that we have a more horizontal process during a crisis rather than a vertical process. And my final point is dealing with success. Now I know people say, generally we talk about dealing with failure. So what's the big deal about dealing with success? And I think in times of crisis, two aspects, of success that are important. The first is, how do you define success? Now, for example, in an organization, is success defined purely in financial terms, that we've broken back into our profits? Is it defined in terms of are your team members satisfied with what has happened? Are they also a part of the success story? Is it to do with how your customers, whether they are satisfied or not? Has it to do with your responsibilities towards the community? So how exactly are you going to define success in your company? Purely in monetary terms? In the army, for example, we always have this debate of how to define success. Is it in winning the war or is it in winning the peace? So if you want to win the war, you have to behave in a different way. If you want to win the peace, you have to look at your operations differently. Is it merely in defeating terrorists that we are succeeding, or is it in bringing peace, for example, to Jammu and Kashmir? And the second thing is when to declare victory. And again, I think leaders need to be cautious. In any crisis, there is a sense that, every time there is a small success, we drum it up and say, oh, we have overcome this problem. And I think we need to be a little careful about that. Recoveries from crisis take a long time. And while, yes, we must celebrate each success along the way, uh, please don't declare victory prematurely and say we have beaten the crisis, because then people are going to relax. And then again, it's going to have a sort of a long-term impact on how organizations recover from crisis. So I think it's important not only to understand how to deal with failures, it's also important to understand how to deal with success. And let me end with a slide. And again, a lesson for leaders. So Heraclitus was an ancient Greek philosopher, and he said, "No man ever steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river, and he's not the same man." The point he was making is every situation is different. And just because you've dealt with one crisis, don't think that you can apply exactly the same lessons to another crisis. So leaders need to be flexible enough. Principles could be the same, but conditions and situations would be different. And it's important for good leaders, to be able to handle those situations. So I will end my talk here, and would be my pleasure and privilege to take any questions that come my way. Thank you very much.
Thank you, General D.S. Hooda, for such a lovely presentation. It was really eye-opening. And, in our lives, we would have heard these suggestions in some way or the other, but the way you have presented have left a mark on our hearts. So hopefully this will help us to lead better teams, be more productive, and underlying principles, like you said, are, similar, while the domains may be different. So that's really encouraging. I've got a flurry of questions, and people are really excited about getting inputs from you. So I will try to kind of squeeze them and kind of structure them for you so that the answers are there. So the first question that comes around is like from your beginning of your presentation is from Manan Sharma, Sumit Bhatnagar, and a couple of other peoples who are really keen to know, and because these are the real life situations that we feel in our day-to-day lives also while we are leading teams and working, is that while it is while it is very easy to motivate people in a very front-ending task which is very visible to the environment, for example, surgical strike, like you said, is a very, very talked about mission, and everybody, even kids know about it. So it's a very, very well talked about incidents. And the, like you said, that you define success, it's very we like the underlying sentiment of the audience is that it's a little easier for you to kind of encourage and motivate those people because results are very visible. How are you able to motivate people who are in places like you just showed in Siachen? And this happens in our normal corporate lives as well, because there are people who are working on a core product and there are people who are just sustaining certain other products. So we would like to understand that.
Okay, Shilpa, that's important. In good times, everybody is good. Everybody is motivated. Everybody's happy. Here is my fat salary package, which is coming, to me every month. But in times of crisis, when there are personal difficulties, there are family difficulties, then how do you keep people motivated? I think the first thing is that the leader himself has to set the standard. I mean, you have to be able to sort of take the same difficulties that your team is facing. So in our case, in situations like this, you will always find in the difficult areas, in the difficult posts, officers will be present along with their men. So he's the one who's leading. So if you see a patrol which is moving through snow, the first person on that patrol is probably going to be the officer. So he always leads the way. So I think the first thing is, are we only suffering, and our leaders, whether it is mid-level leadership, senior level leadership, is it also along with us and feeling the same kind of difficulties and pinches that we are feeling? And I think that somehow to me is the most motivating thing, that like, here's my boss and he's exactly doing the same thing and like going through the same troubles and tribulations that I'm going through. I think the second thing is, I talked about the organizational ethos, about the culture that you create. What sort of organizational sort of bonding have you managed to create within your organization? At the end of the day, yes, there is family support, but at work, I think people sort of look at each other, rely on each other, and if you had that kind of climate in the organization, that to me helps enormously in people sort of having each other's shoulders to cry on. You would see also in times of COVID, you can see two different organizations. One, which has fragmented and people have left and who've gone, and there is another organization where they've been able to hold their people together, despite both the organizations facing the same kind of situation. And the reason is trust in each other, trust in the organization, that yes, here is an organization which is going to support us. I think those are things that, and this kind of bonding, frankly, is not built only during crisis. It's in normal times. Not only official interaction, but social interactions that you've had. And I think in the army, for example, we lay great stress on social interactions. Meeting off office hours. So some of that culture, if it can be created, I think that will go a long way.
Thanks, General Hooda. Very, very interesting inputs. And I'm sure people will gather a lot in terms of, deriving success. A very interesting question from Payal Garg with some numbers therein. And she says that there is 80% reduction in civilian deaths and 70% reduction in insurgency in Northeast states in the last 8 years. And she's looking for an answer. What were the major things done for this?
Okay, yes, you're right. So it's actually, while not only 80 and 70%, actually it's much more.
Much more, okay.
So, for example, if I remember correctly, in the Northeast states of Assam, Nagaland, and Manipur, in 2008 there were more than 1,000 deaths. In 2020, the total deaths are 15. That's all. So, what has gone into it? I think in the manner in which the army has operated, it's not only when you're looking at sort of numbers of terrorists, etc. I think the key is, can you get the population behind you? Can you get the population to have trust and faith in the government? So what is happening today in the Northeast is, even the longest lasting insurgency, which was the Naga insurgency, which wanted independence from India, is today in talks with the government for a political settlement. So I think the key is, one is to improve the security situation, but more important than that, and I made a brief mention when I said winning the peace, is getting the people behind you to say that yes, we are much better off within the state of India, to have trust and faith in the government. I think that has more than anything else, brought the situation under control in the Northeast.
Right. Sir, very rightly put, and a very corollarized question that is coming out of this is twofold, that, When you are in a leadership position at all levels, like whether you are at a middle level or a senior level positions, there are times where, like you said, that, in terms of achieving certain goals, you have to you have to lead by example, in certain times. But there are certain times when you have to do this. You are in a very, very tricky situation, and you are the one who has to take decision. Uh, and you are in a lot of you are in a position where there is where it's difficult for you to take, the situation is very difficult. So how does self motivation work in context of the army? Because you must be standing in a, maybe the enemy is in front of you with a gunshot, at point blank maybe, and then you have to decide a few things and motivate you that you will be able to pass this crisis. So how does what is it that is going on in the mind of a soldier, and how we can learn from that in terms of the situations we face?
So what instinctively kicks in are two things. When you're suddenly faced with a situation and what decision to take. I think the first thing that kicks in is the sort of values that have been so ingrained into you. So values like courage, comradeship. I gave you that example of these two people rushing in
Correct.
without any thought. So it's the values that you hold dear, that have been ingrained in you, that instinctively drive you towards a path. So just to give you a sort of a crude example, a guy who thinks in a particular manner will act in a particular manner. I mean, those are his values that he has imbibed, and so he will act in that. So if he's a thief, the first thing he's going to do is think like that. So one is the values that have sort of been ingrained with you, and secondly, I think your own experience you should not discount. If you got into a leadership position, it is through some dint of hard work, having gone through all the rut that other people have gone through, and that's the reason why you have been promoted to a leadership level. So trust your instincts, and those instincts will come from your experience. So have faith in yourself. Don't start doubting yourself that am I doing something right or wrong. I mean, after all, you got into that position because of your own values, because of your own character, because of your own experience. So I think have faith in yourself, and don't shy away from taking a decision. See, every time a decision will not be completely perfect. I mean, can you name one person starting from the great leaders that we've had in India and abroad who have taken every decision that was perfectly right? It doesn't happen. So just have confidence in yourself. Sometimes, yeah, you will make mistakes, but even from those mistakes, you'll probably learn and be experienced for the next time. So take the decision. Don't shy away from taking decisions.
Great. So, like, the summary is that, while you are in a leadership position and you've gone through all the trainings and the experiences to reach there, the instinct will do its job.
Yeah,
So
should
that
in normal
is
case. Yeah,
in
yeah,
normal cases, right?
yeah.
A very interesting question that has come up from Shashwat Rastogi, and it is in the current context, but I'll try to link it to the leadership learnings that you have shared. You just mentioned in your slide set that you have to be very clear on the goal. Like, for you said that you have to define success, whether it is winning a war or winning peace. And Shatwa's question is, I think, related to this fact that, there's a lot of conversation going on between India and China with respect to whatever is happening on the borders that we share with them. And, we are talking a lot to them. And so what is your opinion in terms of what is a clear goal there? Like, are we like looking for peace, or are we ever going to have a consensus on it? And what should we do in a situation like this when we are, and I'm sure like we were just discussing before the meeting as well, that things get delayed because of certain reasons, and how should we kind of keep our frustration meter down and the success meter up to keep us motivated and look for what we are actually looking for?
So I think one is, as I said, you need to clearly define, what your bottom line or what your goal is. And I think in the case of what is happening with India and China, uh, India has clearly defined, what it wants. And what it wants is that the Chinese should go back to positions that existed in May before they came and carried out intrusion in areas that we consider our own. So that's the bottom line, that we want you to go back. Now, also, I think rightly and from both sides, nobody wants, sort of to engage in a full-scale war. I think it's going to be destructive at a time like this for both the countries. So the idea is, can we engage in conversation with them? And we've had a large number of talks and persuade them to go back. Now, I know it's looking difficult at this time because we haven't been able to arrive at any consensus. But meantime, the way we have deployed along the borders, we've sent a very strong signal. Our actions in August, when we occupied some heights in along the Kailash range, along the LAC, have sent a strong signal to the Chinese. Also, what we are doing in terms of, a certain amount of economic pressure by banning some of their apps, etc., is to send a signal. Do you want to hold India-China ties hostage to your movement on the LAC? So let's see. It's not something that is going to get defined or, sorted out in a hurry. But I think India has made its stance very firm, and I'm hoping that things work out to our advantage.
Thank you, sir, for the same. Our next question is from Sparsh Sharma, and it is related to your experiences in the army. He wants to understand what was your experience when you appeared for SSB, and what did you think that made you different from other people? Like you are the man for the job.
So one thing, to be honest with you, I come from a family of soldiers. So my grandfather was in the army, my father was in the army, my elder brother joined the army before me, my elder sister married to an army officer. So in some ways, it was a path that was sort of, charted out, that here you are, you have, and we like the army profession, having grown up in it. So it wasn't something that, you were forced into. And therefore, I think it just seemed like a natural progression. As a 15-year-old going for SSB, and as a 16-year-old, going to NDA, just seemed like the natural thing to do. I didn't think there was something special about me. I think, at that age, you're just part of a group, just wanting to, join the military, join the army, bond with your course-mates and friends. It's only as you grow up in service that, you find that you are progressing a little more than some of your comrades. But I guess that happens, I think, in all walks of life. So really nothing that, I would say I'm special or I have some special quality. Yeah.
Well, that's very humble of you to say, sir, but I'll take that as an answer. And the next question is again very interesting one, because that's the way, see, in my experiences, sir, we've seen that the lifestyle and the way of working in army is very different from the way we live, the civilian lifestyle. And in civilian lifestyle, there is a certain level of mediocrity in terms of delivering when at places at work, while it is completely unacceptable in the army, because you can't afford to be mediocre there. You have to be either, it's pretty much black or white there, like you have to do it or you don't have to do it. And we've heard a lot of stories, that through media, through content that is there on the internet, in terms of how tough the trainings are, and people give up in between trainings, they come back home and they go for alternative jobs. So so how so very interesting questions with respect to that has come is that as army leaders, do you identify top talents and give differentiated growth plans or rewards? How do we give positive message instead of kind of creating a competitive spirit in terms of this to the soldiers, because that's something we really need to learn from the army.
Yeah, So, just to the first part that you talked about, I think we understand that the costs of what the army does or does not do are enormously, enormously high. I mean, uh, s- it's, failure is not an option, because then it affects the complete nation. See the state of country after India lost 1962 war. I mean, there was, despair everywhere. And so we understand in the army that the stakes are high, and therefore, performance parameters, what we do has to be something that we absolutely give our best, and mediocrity is not an option. How do we select people? Yes, there is a fairly stringent process of selection of officers for senior ranks. So it follows a system of performance appraisal, how you have performed in your day-to-day life, how you have performed on various training courses, teaching courses that you attend. So it's based on that the selection process is done. Uh, and I think it's when you look at a promotion or a rise pyramid within any organization, the sharpest pyramid is probably there in the army. So maybe about 0.2% or something will actually make it to the rank of a general.
Mm.
So yeah, the selection process is fairly stringent. We have a separate branch. It's called the military secretary branch, that only looks at officer management, promotions, posting. So people are also based on their character qualities, based on their professional ability, are then posted also to separate places and organizations that suit their capabilities best. So this is a huge process, that goes on within the army.
Nice. And if the key takeaway is that there is a lot of focus in the human resource development as a army
Absolutely,
soldier as well.
absolutely.
And that is something, if we are able to inculcate effectively in our corporate lives, in civilian lives, it will help us to do the duties well. Thanks, sir, for this one. There's a little one very controversial one, and I will take the liberty of asking you. So, you know, after your success and India's success in the surgical strikes itself, the new India has changed, sir, and there's no denying. The decision making is faster. We are very clear, like you said, that we are very clear in terms of India's stance with China on this topic. So there is a very evident change in terms of the decision making process and the way it is being projected to the entire world also. So there is an interesting question from Anil Sharma, where he says that US General MacArthur had said that whatever the gallant soldiers gain with their blood and sweat on the battlefield, the politicians lose it on the negotiating tables. So what are your comments on the same?
So not always. Yes, it is. It is in some cases. Uh, See, I think also for us in the military, we also need to understand, as I said, winning the war is not everything. So when negotiations happen, are the negotiations happening with the purpose of bringing sort of everlasting peace or long peace? And in those cases, sometimes what you have gained, you have to sort of bargain and sort of give away. So let's not completely sort of say that every time the politicians are working, national interests are not being considered. That's not true. I mean, let's grant it to our political leadership that they also look at national interests, which are at stake. So I think if both the military leadership and the political leadership work in harmony, that would probably be the best thing that can happen as far as nations are concerned.
Great. Thank you, sir, for this one. There is a very good question by Dhruv Bansal, and the key input that he's trying to ask is that we feel, and I think all individuals, we feel that there is always scope for improvement. Like not all of nobody is perfect, right? And that goes right for all the organizations that are. So his question is that in what changes you want in our Indian army for its betterment, if you think there is some scope for betterment there, How do you rate that organization? And do you think that we could change a few things that could make us a better army?
For sure, as he's saying that there's always scope for improvement, and I think even within the Indian Army, uh, of which I am very proud of its performance and its capabilities, there is certainly scope for improvement. Uh, I can think of two things, readily upfront. One is technology adoption, and I think that's an area that we need to look at most seriously. Uh, till now, there has been great focus on the size of the army, uh, the number of major platforms, etc. But now technology, just as is disrupting businesses worldwide, is disrupting governance, is disrupting the way we look at things. It's also disrupting how we looked at war fighting. And so I think technology is one area that the Indian Army needs to imbibe more. And in line with adopting technology, I think we also need to start looking at our what we call professional military education, and how we can align that to new techniques of war fighting, new technologies, etc. So side by side, as we adopt technology, military education system also needs to be geared up for that. So these are areas I think if we can do better, it will help the army become more professional and more oriented towards future wars.
So I think this is a very, I'm sure all the people who are engineers and listening to this are thrilled that they have a chance to play a very good role in with the
Absolutely.
military. And yeah, sincerely believe that technology is becoming disruptive for businesses, economy. So it should play the key role in the defense as well, where accuracy is the need of the hour. So completely agree,
Which you are working on.
which we all are working on, the engineers from PEC. So yeah, we'll take that liberty to understand. This is a question from Prakhar Tomar, and I also thought that personally I would like to ask you in this area as well. Army is a very disciplined lifestyle. The day to day, even the day to day things that we do are very, very meticulously done. You're on schedule. The respect for time is way too high than a normal civilian or a corporate life. So, and it is with this pandemic thing coming in, I think there is a dramatic shift in even that, because people are working from home, there are flexible learning working hours, and the millennial lifestyle is creeping in for our future generations. So the key part is that how that army ethics can be built in a general lifestyle. And what the question there is that, do you think that the motivation to people to kind of follow that tough kind of a lifestyle, what is the benefit? Like, can we answer the question that what is the benefit of following that discipline in our day-to-day lives?
So the values, the ethic of an organization is based on what its role is. And therefore, in the army, we talk about loyalty, we talk about obedience, we talk about comradeship, because it's absolutely sort of essential for us. You can't have somebody and you're telling him, here is this hill you have to go up. More than half of you are probably going to die due to enemy fire, and you can't have somebody saying, I'm not going to do it, I'm not going to lose my life. So obedience and instant obedience is something that is demanded because it's the nature of the job we do. And so therefore I also mentioned as a part of my talk, it's for you to decide within your organization which are values that are critical for your functioning. What is it that you will want to demand from your members, from your team members? But having said that, I mean, certain things like discipline, being on time, I think these are values that are good in any organization. I mean, I am often surprised when I used to go somewhere, and some time is given to you, and you land up there exactly at that time, and you say, you've come early, but this was the time that was given to me. So how am I early? But no, normally everybody comes half an hour, 45 minutes late. So, you sometimes end up being the only person, in that function or in that party, and nobody's there. So,
True.
but I think these are things, if you respect, being on time, these will stand you in good stead, through your work, irrespective of which organization you are, or what you do. But as I said, largely it's good for organizations based on their task, based on their role, based on their objectives and their purpose, to have their own set of values that can stand you in good stead.
Thanks for this one. There is a generic list of questions that I'm getting, and they're centered about one very important thought, and we can align it to our discussion as well. So, all of us understand that intelligence forms a very, very key part of the functioning of the army, because in case of this thing, intelligence plays a very key role in terms, it defines the success in some way for this thing, and the leakage of that information can do whatever can be disruptive in a negative sense. And how it maps to the corporate running is that we also kind of people who are running the economy, doing businesses also, are also dependent on these researches for their set of domain. Like we do a lot of competition analysis, what our competitors are doing, are we doing it better, should we do it, is it aligned to our roadmap, and stuff like that. So have you ever seen a leak in intel in the army domain, and how you've handled it, what has been the contingencies, and how we can map it to our day-to-day corporate lives?
So I think the basic thing is security. And how do you keep your information secure? More and more, yes, there are some cases of leakage from our soldiers, etc. You've heard cases of people being honey trapped, but the intelligence that goes out from that is actually fairly low level intelligence. I think what has happened now is more and more information is going out through the cyberspace. Cyber attacks, intelligence leaking out, massive amounts of intelligence leaking out of that. And there are only two things to do. One is the procedures that you establish within your organization to secure your information. Those procedures must be perfect. And the second is the human element, because mistakes are often made by humans not following those processes and procedures. So, for example, there's a very famous cyber attack on the Iranian nuclear plant at Natanz, in which almost 30-40% of the centrifuges were damaged. And how did that cyber attack take place? Because one scientist plugged in a pen drive into his computer. So I think it's also important for the people to understand that the processes and policies that are put in place for security are something that are followed by everyone. And I cannot tell you the huge importance of this, even among your own organization and industry. The amount of industrial espionage that is taking place is something that I'm sure you would all be aware of. So uh, it is your processes and people both who have to work together to protect it.
True. So do you have more time for us, or like we need to close it faster? In that case, I'll structure the list of questions, because there's too many questions that are coming here. So I wanted to ask you before we close the session.
No, so I'm okay. So we can go ahead for some more time.
Some more time, okay. A very a nice question on a personal front that has been asked is by let me see. Yeah, what would you be in case you wouldn't have been a army person? I think I know the answer, but I would like you to answer.
I honestly can't imagine. I told you I first put on my uniform when I was 16 years old. When I joined the National Defense Academy, I had put on my uniform at that time, and I took it off when I was 60 years old. So it was 44 years in uniform. So I honestly, I didn't even give it a thought, and I can't even imagine myself now, at this stage of having been in another profession. I've really enjoyed my time in the army, given me great satisfaction to be able to do what I could do, and uh, the culture, the character that it has developed in me also is something that I'm proud of. So I honestly can't think of another profession at this
Yes,
stage.
I expected this. I expected this answer. And how does it work, sir? Like you officially retired in the end of 2016. So does the team come to you back for consulting assignments, for suggestions on how they should execute their plans? Does that happen? Does that bond remain in terms of work?
So there is huge bonding between services and the ex-servicemen. Huge bond. I mean, the after all, the bonds that you have built up over so many years, it's not something that can get sort of diluted just because you've taken off the uniform. As far as advice is concerned, generally, even we stay away from interfering or talking about routine sort of day-to-day events, because there is another leader in place, and let him take that decision. But how services of ex-servicemen is utilized is, so sometimes schools of instructions will call you to give talks, and I've gone on a large number of those talks to address students. There are some think tanks where they will call you for seminars, etc. So that's how you can utilize your expertise, your experience that you gained. Some of us, like I do a little bit of writing for journals and newspapers. That keeps us busy. So yes, we try and keep in touch with our profession. We try and impart whatever advice and experience we have, while trying to remain away from trying to sort of look too intrusive in day-to-day functioning. Well, that's the responsibility of the current leadership.
Correct. So there's one very nice question from Chirag Gupta. I think he's a part of the organizing committee as well. He says that, and that's the feeling even we get when we read about, the surgical strike in the newspapers, and we go back to it. It's kind of, for every Indian, it's kind of a personal win. So he says that, could you take us through what was the atmosphere in the war room on the night of 28-29 September? Chirag Gupta, batch of 2021.
Okay, so Chirag, should I say a mix of anxiety and confidence? I mean, I don't know whether those two emotions mix, anxiety and confidence.
Yes.
So in the war room, there were a few of us. I was there, and some of my staff members were there, and of course the teams had all gone across the line of control. They were across into borders. We were watching some of what was happening. So we had aerial surveillance, and we had drones up in the air, and we could sort of observe the target area, although you couldn't make out exactly what is going on. The reason why I say anxiety and confidence because as I said, we had been preparing for almost a year. Selection of soldiers, we were very confident about our soldiers. I mean, extremely well trained, extremely motivated. So we had no doubt that they would be able to do the operation that was given to them. Anxiety was, you had hundreds of soldiers who were across the line of control, and our sort of thought running through our minds was, this is a live situation. Bullets are going to fly. What happens if a large number of our people get injured in the operation? So while the operation may be successful, you could have large number of injuries. And so getting those injured people back into our own area from Pakistan territory, would have been a very difficult and, would have required a lot of other actions to be taken by us to ensure that everybody comes back safe. So there was a level of anxiety that, all our men should come back safe. So I personally heaved a sigh of relief when everybody came back across the border without a single injury. I think that was the big achievement of the surgical strike.
Right, so I mean that was thrilling for like us also when we got to know that nobody was hurt, everybody came. We've seen countries across the world who follow this rule, and once it got executed in the Indian context, it was really really encouraging. So that's a feedback from the civilian standpoint that we took it as a
Right.
personal personal win. I'll take just two last questions, and before we close this talk, one is from Nehal, and it is when a leader has to take a quick and firm decision, then what principle he or she should keep in mind, and how to be sure of the decision's correctness. But more so in terms of how to, you have to, when you have to take quick decisions, you have to like kind of compare the pros and cons in real time. So how do you do that to take effective decisions? I know it's a game of mind, but any inputs in terms of managing that confluence in your mind and taking the right decision?
So I think a couple of things. As I said before, one is your experience and sort of instinct will kick in and tell you that this is probably the right path. So there is, and often there is no confusion on what is the right path and what is the wrong path. I think where the dilemma comes is when you have to play off individuals versus a larger good. And I made that mention. So, for example, at Uri, when the earthquake happened, we had only very few dozers with us. And initially, we put those dozers to work on, digging through the rubble, making sure we pull out all survivors. So everything was diverted there. After a few days, well, we couldn't recover everybody. A lot of people were buried under vast amounts of rubble. So should we then divert some of these dozers to start opening the roads, or should we keep them there in the hope that we can, get some more survivors? So I'm saying this sometimes this dilemma of uh, this decision is going to hurt the individual, but is probably for the larger organizational good. And I think there, you have to sort of weigh off as to what is appropriate at what stage. Uh, as far as ensuring that all your decisions are correct, um, I'm not sure you can always ensure that, because there are some decisions which I said will hurt somebody, but can be for the good of the other.
Good of
So yeah, so it's not always necessary that every decision pleases and makes everyone happy. In a crisis, that is not going to happen.
Great. General Hooda, it's the last question for you. And I have had this conversation with you for past 1 hour. I'm talking to you. And when I was introduced by the PEC team that I'm going to speak to you, I was very scared in terms of, oh, there's this general who's coming and, it's going to be really tough. And, how is it going to be? But a leadership trait that everybody talks about across the country, and what I've also noticed in my small interaction with you is that keeping calm is very important in terms of taking the right decisions or taking and being very objective. So in and it is all of us are probably learning this thing, but we would like to know your inputs in terms of how to keep calm in high pressure situations. Is there a guru mantra for that?
I think you just have to sort of train yourself and force yourself. Listen, it's not as if when you're faced with a crisis that it doesn't sort of run through your mind, it doesn't make you nervous, it doesn't sort of breed doubts in your head. Difficult situations do that. I think why it's important to remain calm is because the atmosphere that a leader radiates, the attitude that he radiates, immediately flows down to all his juniors. And we've seen that in the army. In the army, in fact, we say, panic spreads very fast. So, as a leader, if you are showing uncertainty, doubts, you are showing anger, you will see that message get transmitted right down. Your juniors will go running out and say, "Ah, this guy, he's in some sort of panic," and then the juniors will think, oh my God, if he doesn't know what to do, what is going to happen? So I think as a leader, you have to deliberately, show at least an external appearance of being calm, of being completely under control, and keep your emotions under control. I think that that is the hallmark of somebody who's respected and somebody who's a good leader. I know there are people who say, if I show my anger, if I shout at my junior, that's a more effective way to show that I'm a great leader. My own personal experience is, just the opposite.
Just Well, thank you so much, General Hooda, for this enriching talk. I think we've gathered a lot of gems from this talk, which if we implement even 1% of it in our day-to-day lives, we would, see leaps and bounds of success. I'll hand it over to Divya to take it forward. Divya, over to you.
Okay, so I think I need to come back to the moment. It was one of the best leadership talks that I've ever heard, sir. And I must tell you, it has a profound impact on our lives ahead. And thank you so much for joining us today and sparing the time. And I'll also be, would request our director, Dr. Sanghi, which I can see that he also wants to interact. But a big thank you to you and for sharing all your thoughts and the motivation. So,
My pleasure, Divya. My pleasure.
Thank you very much. It was, I was spellbound. I've heard, as Divya said, leadership talks, but this was, absolutely amazing. And I do look forward to having face-to-face interaction on our campus, hopefully before 31st March. Thank you very much for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
My pleasure, Dr. Sanghi. My pleasure.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you all very much, and our best wishes for Army Day. And thank you, Divya, for inviting me. It was a great interaction. I really enjoyed it.